Well, I think we've got a critical mass of people. Thank you very much for coming along. I know there's a lot of competition for activity at the forum, and thank you to Timotei and the organisers for giving me an opportunity to tell you a story today. This is something that it's actually come up quite a lot also in the discussions that I've been hearing in the course of yesterday afternoon and this morning. Comments around well-being, quality of life. This morning when we were looking at questions of demography, on trust as well. And in a sense, it's a big existential question that we are posing ourselves. And what I wanted to do was maybe kick things off a little bit by starting out with, as I did yesterday actually in the panel on digital economy. Are you able to help me with this? Yeah, cool. Okay. What's your name? Luca. Luca. It's a double act today with Luca. I hope my voice carries. So what is quality of life? Let's take the Collins definition. How many of you have heard of healthy, wealthy, and wise? Health, wealth, and happiness. So actually, if you go ahead and click that. Okay. This is how the Collins dictionary would define it. General well-being of a person or society is defined in terms of health and happiness rather than wealth. Interesting, rather than. And we often have, are you able to hear me? If you are, I will dispense with carrying around the mic because I have some notes in case there are important things that I forget to say, which sometimes happens. Let me also look at the context within which we consider this. There are different aspects of our life that we look at. I mean, when you're looking at quality of life, this pretty much touches on anything that we can imagine in human action. Whether that be if you are concerned with international development, and I had a lady from an NGO this morning coming up to me and asking me about the impact that this work could have on the Millennium Development Goals. And perhaps we can discuss that later. Healthcare, when you think about well-being, I don't know how many of you have taken the lift here in the hotel, but probably we should have held this session down in the wellness centre. Many people come here because they want to actually fix up their body and perhaps also their mind, and they're looking at that. In the political realm as well, this is important. Anyone who's involved in politics, you know, politics, end of the day, is about human beings and doing what human beings want. If you don't do that for a period of time, you're not going to last much in politics. And employment, it's important because it's activity. What are we all involved in our lives? So let's you know, what is it that makes for a good life? This is also, I would say, a pretty philosophical question. So let's ask one of the most well-known philosophers of Greek times what he might have said. Quality of life is determined by its activities. So we've been exercising our minds around this stuff for a hell of a long time. What I'm going to tell you today, I don't think it's we're not making incredible discoveries. Probably what we're doing in part is rediscovering. And along that question of rediscovery, I wanted to answer this question for you as well. Why is the OECD involved in this? Now, before you click again, unclick. This is where we haven't rehearsed. My fault. What would those of you? What do you think of when you think of the OECD? Just throw out some words quickly.
Statistics, economics, development.
Statistics, economics, development. Okay. Now let's take the first two: statistics and economics. Okay. Well, it's not necessarily the obvious thing that we should be doing well-being, and we should be making that quite central to our work. So what we did was I joined OECD in 2008. We were 3 years away from our 50th anniversary, and with the global economy going down the proverbial toilet, when I arrived, the organisation stood for a better world economy. And this was in early 2008. We'd had Northern Rock in the United Kingdom, and we were soon to have Lehman Brothers. And so you could see that really, that perspective was not an enlightening one. And we were 3 years away from celebrating something. which would not be a moment for celebration. So we had to actually revisit a little bit. And what was in the convention, the founding convention of the OECD? For someone who just joined, it's really interesting to read this document. And what do you discover when you go in there? We're actually about improving the economic and social well-being of peoples. And I really like the use of the word societal this morning. One of the people that asked the question in your panel, Luzavis, he said societal. And I think we've actually cut, that's a word we used a lot when we were talking in the OECD context. What is this about? It's not just economic, it's not just social, it's not just political, it's everything. It's coming all together. So that's, if you like, a reason why we went down that. Also, because we'd been doing it for a little while. At the OECD, we'd had a project called Measuring Societal Progress that began in the early 2000s. And it was looking at issues around progress, well-being, and sustainability. These were keywords that we were looking at. Sustainability over time, very interesting, because when people talk about sustainability, they can sometimes think in certain senses. If you're looking at issues around well-being, you're very much not looking at taking photographs. You're looking at trends over a period of time and what is happening. So it's very much a medium and long-term exercise that you're involved in, and also the extent to which what you can put in place in terms of well-being and quality of life can last. Is it lasting, or is it something that is going to be ephemeral? Last but not least, what is the relationship to GDP? You've often heard a desire from people to go beyond GDP, and we've often expressed that, and I'm going to come back to it because it's part of this story. But what I'm going to tell you about now is not a rejection of GDP, but GDP was never designed to be a measure of quality of life and well-being. So GDP was done a disservice. When you go into GDP, I feel sorry for GDP because it's got a bad name and it doesn't deserve to have that bad name. Those of you interested in that, I recommend a book by Diane Coyle, A Brief History of GDP, and she goes through that very well. And when you read that book, you also discover how involved the OECD was in measuring GDP and then also in the promotion of GDP. But we never intended it to become that. And so part of what we wanted to do was try and come up with something that we were also in a good place to come up with as well. So not looking at replacing GDP, but more looking at complementing it. Now this is a classic framework that you're going to find in an OECD context. The framework around individual well-being and the questions of sustainability of well-being over time. So you're looking at different types of capital. We're very used to talking about economic capital, natural capital, often linked to the environment, human capital, all about that, social capital. But we're looking at how does that play in, and that sustainability of well-being play in over time. Now let's zoom in to what we're looking at now. How did we come up with these 11 dimensions? We didn't do it overnight. We didn't stick our finger up and go, okay, we think this is... We actually got a group of experts from many, many countries over a long period of time who would meet every 2-3 years. Many of them involved in measurement activities, many involved with statistical backgrounds. And I first connected into this in a meeting in Korea in Busan, and the connection of Slovenia is strong in all of this, and I'm going to come back to it as well. So there's a very appropriate, the fact that we're doing it today here is very appropriate, and the person I'm going to cite, he would have liked to join us, but he's hosting a lunch right now here. He's a big fan. Left-hand side, right-hand side. Okay, so what have we done? When we developed the framework for the Better Life Index and for the OECD's work going forward, we have identified 11 dimensions. The first thing I'm going to say to you is think about what is not on that list that you would like to see on that list. If you can please be thinking about that now, and when we do have a little bit of a discussion afterwards, I'm really curious to have your thoughts on it. However, we've zoomed in on 3 elements of the material, which is connected to GDP, your income and wealth, your jobs and earnings, and the quality of your housing. All of these three elements, they're very important elements to any life, and we certainly at the OECD wouldn't reject any of that, and I don't think any of us would somehow throw this out, sort of throw babies out with bathwater. But is that it? Is it just about that? That's the measure of life. This morning, Luzovic, you had your guest from the United Nations who was saying that how can you measure someone? Oh, because they're worth $1 billion or they're worth $1 million. Really? That's it? Growing up, certainly in my household, I don't think that was ever something that was cited to me as a measure of admiration, necessarily. I grew up in an academic background, so maybe that I was conditioned as well. But people weren't measured because of what they earned. And is that the measure that we have of, and the admiration we have for people in daily life? It may be in some cases. Those of us of a religious disposition, I know it's very connected to sort of Protestant religions, that you accumulate wealth in the terrestrial sphere, and then that is going to reflect. But if we take it as read that we have many different denominations around the world, etc., can we just reduce things down to the material? Look on the left-hand side. It's obvious. None of what you see on the left-hand side, wow, incredible. However, do we make the connection with all of those elements when we really think about quality of life, well-being, what we want, and then connect it back to what we're all here for this forum? This is a forum where you're bringing decision makers together, policy makers together, people who have a capacity to shape the world as it's going to be in the future. But what are we working towards? What is the purpose? And part of what we're looking at is seeing whether a framework of this type can be helpful as we work post-crisis. As we look to the emerge from the crisis, we don't want to go back to where we were, so we don't want to go back to a fixation on the financial services industry alone, and indeed, what does the financial services industry serve? Does it serve that? Or does it serve something else? So you're putting this purpose. Health. It's obvious. Well-being. Health, number one. This is a very important element. Work-life balance. Very interesting to see how this issue plays around the world. I'm not going to give it away, but we'll see later on how much importance people attach to it. Education and skills. Social connections. When you think about what makes a fulfilling life, for some people it's being alone. But for many people it's actually the interaction, it's the connectivity, it's the relationship, it's the societal element. Civic engagement and governance. I think probably we are not representative of the population at large. Here in this community, I think we would attach a lot of importance to this because we know what it means, because we know the influence it has in shaping other elements. The quality of the environment, very important, particularly here in these surroundings, in Bled, when you look around. It's a great advert. Personal security. And last but not least, it's got a little heart behind, next to it. It's the closest we come to happiness. This is the OECD, after all. I mean, don't ask us too much. But the point we're making is this isn't a happiness index. This is quality of life well-being, of which subjective well-being, jargonic term for sense of happiness, that's part of it. Do you have a disposition which is more positive, which is more enthusiastic? Are there reasons why you generally feel more positive, even if you don't have very good health? You and I all know people who have a happier disposition perhaps than others in certain circumstances, even when they are confronted with very difficult situations. Also, that subjective well-being can be impacted over time. If over a long period of time people suffer stress, or in the context of the crisis, we've seen how that can impact. So let's move on now from that. And so those 11 dimensions that we've established, we have a total of 24 indicators that underpin them. These indicators, this data, we have been collecting in some cases at the OECD for the best part of 50 years, not in all cases. And I'm giving you here 3 examples. The first thing I would say to you is that we are at the antipodes of this process. We are very early in this process. Why do we have so few indicators? The reason is that we have to have absolute comparability between all the countries who are currently captured in the index. There are 36 countries that we have included in the Better Life Index, all the members of the OECD that span 6 continents, and we've also extended to Brazil and Russia since we began this process in 2011, and there are a number of other countries who want to be part of the story. We have 4 indicators under jobs, and we have 3 under educational attainment. And in the case of education, let me zoom in on that for a moment. And this connects you into why it is that we can put this index together. I hope many of you have heard of PISA. In fact, many people had heard of PISA and have heard of PISA and had never heard of the OECD. I think we've done something about that in the last few years because it was so successful. It was if you like, it was a name and a brand in and of itself. It's the Programme for International Student Assessment, the last edition of which came out at the beginning of this year. And you really would have had to be on the moon not to hear about it, because the degree of coverage this received around the world was extraordinary, particularly in places like Asia, where the OECD doesn't have many members. And yet they're all members of PISA. So we have a number of provinces in China who have signed up to this, because what they want to do is they want to compare themselves with the best. And not only that, but those provinces have performed really well in a number of cases. What we've been looking at there is assessing the skills of teenagers in reading, writing, the 3 R's, reading, writing, and arithmetic. We started out in 2000 with 32 countries, and we are up to 65 countries in 2012, and I think we're close to 70 now. Slovenia joined PISA, I think it was in 2006, if my memory serves me right. And we have a clipping, I think it's from the former education minister, now very former, because this was back in 2011, Milan Sfer. But there he is saying, OECD survey should be taken seriously. So you can see how this plays directly in politics. Politicians grab this stuff. Well, he was the education minister, now he isn't, and he's going, oh, come on, you know. When he was probably in the ministry, he was going, oh, God, there go the OECD again, telling me that we haven't done a sufficiently good job. So that's from one element. But now let's look at what was happening, if you like, in the population at large. And take a look at the date there. This is the Financial Times, but this is September 2006. The crisis didn't hit until 2008, September 2008. That's when people really grasped it with the Lehman Brothers catastrophe. We have become rich countries and poor people. So this issue was playing strongly already. There was a dissatisfaction with the fact that we were measuring things, or we were pretending that we could say, you know, country X has got a great GDP, meaning country X is fantastic. Dissatisfaction with that. That isn't rhyming with what people are feeling. What can we start doing about it? And then a little bit later in 2009, this is Joe Stiglitz, who's been a strong supporter of all of this work at the OECD for a long period of time. A poor gauge for progress. GDP is actually a poor gauge. Go back to the thing that's poor GDP wasn't designed to do that, so don't ask it to do something it can't do. And last but not least, the group convened by President Sarkozy at the time at the Sorbonne in Paris, and it was then he who said, and they who said, right, the OECD is the organisation that now needs to take this work forward. We're clear on the priority that it has. Okay, that's fine, that's a learned group, but you've also got angry people. We are now into the crisis, and those angry people, whether they are sitting in the main square in Madrid, the movement that became known as the Indignados, also in Chile, the Occupy movement in the United States. Here in London, you have an example. Many of you remember St. Paul's Cathedral was occupied for many months. You had a really big groundswell of disaffection by a broad brush of the population. This wasn't anarchists or the Black Bloc. This was really deep-seated unease at what the crisis was bringing out. Capitalism wasn't working. What was it actually looking to deliver? Now, at this point, I want to tell you, okay, we come in 2011, and we click again. Thank you. Oh, this is very fuzzy. We're actually going to go straight into telling you what the Better Life Index is in about a minute. Can you turn up the volume?
is proud to present your Better Life Index, an interactive tool that allows you to measure and compare well-being across countries based on 11 topics essential to the quality of life. The flowers represent members of the OECD as well as key partners. Each flower has 11 petals, one for each topic in the index. By using the interactive toolbox, you can begin to create your Better Life Index according to what is important to you. Increase or decrease the priority you give each topic by adjusting the sliders from left to right. Watch as the flowers transform according to your choices. Countries that move to the top are the ones that perform best according to the priorities you set. Petals also change the width, reflecting the importance you give in each topic. To get a clear view of how countries compare in relation to one another, click on Display Countries by Rank. You can also compare well-being inequalities between men and women. And to learn more about a country, click on its flower to go to the country page. Here you can find country-specific key findings and best practices for each topic. giving a snapshot of life in that country. The bar graphs in the middle column give you an overview of how this country performs in each topic. Here, you can even compare the results with another country. On the right, you will find more information about the indicators used in the index, including social and gender inequality. Freely accessible OECD publications are available throughout the website for those who want to learn more. Once you've created your Better Life Index, you are able to compare it with those of other users by country, gender, and age. And share it with your friends and family. The OECD wants to hear from you. Tell us what you believe makes for a better life, and together, we'll discover what's most important to people around the world. Create your Better Life Index today at oecdbetterlifeindex.org.
Okay, that's done better by Andrew than it is by me each time, so that's why I use that thing. I hope you were able to capture it. Basically, one of the key things to have in mind here is that this isn't Moses and the tablets of stone. This isn't the usual OECD ranking, OECD rates country X top. And when you look at the media coverage, you will still see, and I'm sorry, this is lazy journalism, you will still see some people who will say, today the OECD issued its Better Life Index and Australia came top. Really, why? Oh, because you gave everything one? Oh, that's good. The whole point of this exercise is what you are telling us. It's, someone said earlier, it was a gentleman I was having a conversation with in the margins, he said, there's a great event that you need to connect up with. We have keynote listeners. Art of communication, can you listen? And that's fantastic, because this is what we're in the business of doing now. And I'm going to tell you a little bit about that story. So, okay, this is all wonderful, this is all great, website looks lovely, the flowers, you can sort of do all this. But what impact has this had? So we did this, and it was a bit of a risk. We put this out at the moment of our 50th anniversary. Well, I know on the inside, people told me subsequently that there were a lot of people who thought that this wouldn't go anywhere. Okay, let's if we can get back to the presentation. We launched in May 2011, and in August 2014, that's a little bit over 3 years afterwards, we have had over 4.5 million people visit this site. Now, this in the grand scheme of things, 4.5 million, you're going to say that's not a lot. For the OECD, it's massive. We were a very confidential organisation in the French sense of the word, you know, narrow, experts, highfalutin. And this is really the first time we'd ever ventured down a track which is to speak to our ultimate beneficiary, the voter, the citizen, and the taxpayer. Better policies for better lives. Okay, talk to the people whose lives you are supposed to be improving. Interesting, I also think, to see who's at the top of that list of people engaging. People in the US. I have the US with my prejudices. Oh, the US is the most materialistic country in the world, isn't it? They brought us McDonald's, they brought us this, they brought us that, the other. Okay, well, citizens in that country account for 1 in 5 of all the visitors to the index come from the US. France coming in second, quite interesting. Australia coming in high. Australia does quite well in the index, it's true. I think some of that France comes from OECD, but I don't think, no, I'd like to think so, but no, they probably see it as a little bit of competition. Maybe UN, you know, with the Human Development Index, but I don't know about the, yeah. But let's click again, because I think here we are with a lot of experts from Central and Eastern Europe, and we've got interest in Central and Eastern Europe. We've got a long way to go. And here in Slovenia, I think we have about 13,000 people who have visited so far. Obviously, you know, in proportionate terms, the population of the United States and that of Slovenia are very different. Okay, so you're seeing people become interested. The bees are going to the honeypot, or their bees are going to the flower. That's probably the better. And this is where I want to name check Danilo Turk, who's been with us this morning and yesterday, because he's a strong believer in this work and has been for many years. And we were delighted that he joined us in 2011 to throw his heft, his weight behind an initiative of this type. This is someone who's a leading academic, and as you know, who knows, maybe even the future Secretary General of the United Nations we were talking about there. So I thought I'd remind people of that, because people sometimes don't know. A slightly more well-known figure, perhaps a more hardcore figure, someone who you might not necessarily associate with this stuff, well-being, great, let's get back to the serious stuff. Well, Ben Bernanke at the Fed was dealing with all the serious stuff with the crisis, as we know, and it caught his attention. We didn't do anything. He picked it up. And we found that in a speech he delivered at Jackson Hole in 2012, and you know that there's a speech that's just been delivered at Jackson Hole, Janet Yellen and Mario Draghi. It's a pretty important place. He cites it. He says this is going to be the future. And that is a validation. It's an important one when you're looking at this. In the interest of time, I could show you a wonderful clip from the Irish Prime Minister and Deputy Prime Minister who came to the OECD and said, our ambition is to take Ireland from being in the Troika to being at the top of the Better Life Index of the OECD. The Irish Business Council saying similar things. So this is just happening. We're not teeing it up, it's happening. There are things that we tee up, and this is an example, because part of what we want to do with this thing is drive it around the world and make it popular. How do you make it popular? You connect it to things. And this is one of the most enjoyable moments in my professional life at the OECD, because I'm a massive football fan, and it was always my dream to meet a certain gentleman called Pelé. And Pelé was willing to connect himself to the Better Life Index as well. We began work on this with the Getúlio Vargas Foundation a year ago. They translated the index into Portuguese, and I'll come back to that issue of translation because it's critical in getting feedback. And we ran a campaign, is there more to life than football? Everyone suddenly is obsessed with the World Cup. Whether you like football or you don't like football, it's being rammed down your throat all the time. And we had quite a lot of success in connecting this question of well-being, because it is the sports, etc. But it's also about saying, come on, if your team does get knocked out, you're very depressed the next day, but life goes on, doesn't it? If you're mentally healthy, if you're a football obsessive, and then you go and hide away for 3 years until your team is halfway good again. There are some people like that that I know. Anyway, these are just validation elements. Now, what have people told us? So the result after a bit over 3 years, this is an average of, in a sense, the votes that people all around the world have given to the 11 dimensions that I showed earlier. Income is coming in 9th out of 11. So proportionately, people, if you imagine that to be 100%, there is a higher proportion of preferences from people going to health, life satisfaction, education, work-life balance in full, safety, environment, jobs, and housing than income. So it ain't all about money, according to this sample of people, self-selecting it's true, with access to internet it's true, now with a lot more languages to be able to go for as well, but it has some meaning. Those of us who care about civic engagement and governance and politics and involvement, oh dear. Schizophrenia, I would say, because the people completing the index are actually doing this. Perhaps without knowing it, I don't know, but they're not giving importance to it over here. And we were just having a little discussion before we started about whether you needed to perhaps change politics in this direction, get it to connect in with this sort of stuff, the index, in order to get people to fall back in love with certain things. And it's not so much about the ideology, politics is simpler than that, it's about this stuff. What are you offering people? Maybe there's a political party that says, look, I'm more on the materialistic side, but I know that you need a bit of the other stuff as well. And so my balance is, if you vote for me, you're going to get a little bit more of, whereas if you vote for, I don't know, the more quality of life, but you understand that it's multidimensional. It's not all about the economy, stupid. It's complicated, but you can render it a little bit more simple. We kicked off, so first off we kicked off with name recognition, just get this thing known. We had a relatively small number of indexes shared with us initially. These are the indexes that are shared with us. There are a lot of indexes that people complete and share with their friends, and they don't share them with the OECD. Why share them with the OECD? Because the whole point was to be able to share these with you now, and we've been able to do this. We've externalized them for the first time in May. There's a whole website that is running live right now. Every time an index is completed and shared, it's registered and the results appear. But let's look at the preferences as they've evolved over time. What you're able to see is that in 2012, you had, for example, life satisfaction coming out as the most important of the 11 dimensions around the world. That has been overtaken. The more indexes we've had, the higher up in the ranking health has gone into number 1. Note work-life balance, a very steady 4th. So when people think work-life balance is an issue that, say, people in advanced developed countries, or you can afford to worry about that, not true. Not true. This is something people care about all over the world, work-life balance. Then you look at safety, that's really gone up the scale. That's interesting. And jobs has gone down the scale a little bit equally. Income has taken over from community. We are now, I think, pushing about 80,000 indexes shared. I'd encourage you and all your networks, hopefully, if you like this, do the indexes, share it around. The more info we get, the more quality this has as well. Some of the innovations, I was mentioning language. You click on that. We now have the index available in 6 languages, and this has had a very significant impact. We were able to, we have it in French, Russian, Spanish, German and Portuguese, beyond the first English. And the way we follow this is we've basically gone along with the highest number of people visiting us. So we're rewarding our base. We had a lot of people from France and Canada, so French, not because we're based in Paris, but because the Francophones were very strong. Spanish, again, very strong. The ones that we owe something to are the Italians. They're in 8th position, and it is not available in Italian yet, but we're working on that with a view to the Milan Expo next year. We also hope we can interest the Pope in it. He's quite a good driver of opinion at the moment as well. And beyond just saying that you're producing language versions, I wanted to tell you a little bit of impact. When we produced the German version in January, and we'd had a lot of visits from German users, the number of indexes shared with us went through the roof. So we had 2,000 indexes shared with us from Germany in the first week alone. So when you do it in somebody's language, then they feel, okay, now I'm actually going to engage with you. Before it's, oh, I'll have a look. Now you're speaking to me in my language. And that's a really important lesson in all of this as well, if you really want to reach people. I think the linguistic element, when you're talking about things like quality of life, what's really deeply ingrained in you, that is important. So this year, for the first time, that's the Spanish results. When we brought it out in Spanish, for the first year, 2 years, we'd had 40,000 visits, and since June of 2013, 150,000. Mexico's gone through the roof, Chile, Spain, so it really shows, and particularly among older people. We were talking about aging populations this morning and yesterday. When you want to engage with older people, doing it in their language. Their first language is their first language. Second language is, yeah, it's not the same thing. So if you really want to cover the mass of the population, very important to think about that as well. So this is the site now. You can see the bubbles. They're not sort of totally proportionate. The idea is to show the bigger the bubble, the more the number of responses that we've had. But you're seeing dots across the planet. I mean, we've had indexes shared with us over here. I don't even know where that is. And over there exactly, but it's sort of, you know, the middle of the Indian Ocean. Or whatever, you probably know. But it's incredible because this is something that really has struck a chord across the world. And I don't know if we're able to go in and show you Slovenia. I think if you click on, yes. So the beauty as well is that here you have a real-time breakdown. We have 67% of those who are sharing their indexes are men. Global figures for this are 60-40. Why this is, I have no idea. Is it because men spend 60% of time on internet relative to women who spend 40? Perhaps it's possible because women have less time. I don't know. Because they're busier. The women in the audience here, I would encourage you to push this. When we made a real push, for example, in France, with all the women's organisations that, at their request, they came to the OECD on Women's Day, we are now at 50-50 in France. So we're very proud of that, but it takes a little bit of a push in order to get the female voice to emerge a little bit more, and I would encourage you to help with that. Look at the age ranges. The BLI generation is basically between 15 and 34. That's where you're getting most people engaging and sharing their views and their opinions. In the case of Slovenia, really, we're nowhere with the 55 and 65s, but remember, look at the top there. We've only had 144 indexes shared with us in the case of Slovenia, so that's not very many. Now let's do a comparison with Poland, because I know that there are quite a lot of there's quite a lot of interest here in that country, and there are a number of speakers from that part of the world. There we're looking at already almost 1,000 responses. But the interesting thing is to compare, and you can do this in real time on the site, what are the preferences in Slovenia relative to the ones in Poland? Look where environment goes. The environment is the second most important issue for Slovenians, and it's shooting over to 9th position in the case of Poland. So this is a country that cares hugely about the environment, or at least this is the feedback we're getting. Okay, it's 144. And in the case of Poland, you have far less of an interest. So I think these are interesting things. I'm not going to start to extrapolate and tell you why or what does this mean. I think we're still at an early stage. But just having this information is very interesting, and being able to compare it in real time. You're seeing there the figures also in terms of, you've got slightly more women than men in the case of Poland as well, and the age ranges, you're able to see it's a stronger accentuation there of the 15 to 35 generation in the case of Poland as well. And you can do this with any country that you like. Going on, it's oecdbetterlifeindex.org/responses, or you click up on the responses bar. What I've done here is I've actually taken a number of countries in the region together so that you're able to see juxtaposed the collective preferences being manifested in different countries in the region. And so, for example, in the case of Poland, what you're seeing is life satisfaction is ranking highest of the 11, and that is outdoing the other 4 countries. And in the case of Slovenia, it's the least important of the 11 factors, say, relative to the choices made in other countries. So there's an interesting juxtaposition that you can make here as well. But there are trends. So over here on civic engagement, whilst it varies, in the case of Poland, it's rock bottom. And in the case of the Slovak Republic and the Czech Republic, it's a little bit higher. But civic engagement has issues. There's no two ways about it. Okay. A new departure, because these issues around well-being, they're also very connected into where you are. And what I've shown you so far is at a national level, at a state level. But we don't necessarily live all in the same context. I mean, if I were to take countries like Brazil or Russia, who are in the index, if you are in the western part of Russia relative to being in the eastern part of Russia, it's a very different ball game from many respects, whether it's environmentally or from all sorts of aspects. And so one of the things that we've done very recently is develop for the first time what is an offshoot of this work, which is looking at regional well-being. Now, it's not the Better Life Index for regions. There is no interactivity at this stage, so there's no capacity for you to express preferences. This is based on data. The data is a lot more limited. Where we have 24 indicators for the index, we only have 10 for the regional work, so it's a lot less robust. And the dimensions, we have 8 dimensions, one of which we don't have in the Better Life Index, which is the provision of services. And maybe that's something that we need to consider. I was asking you at the beginning, what things do you think are not in the index that should be in the index? That's something that one could think about. But if you zoom here, this is Western Slovenia. Zoom out, sorry, can you click back again? What you can see here is out of 10, Western Slovenia does very strongly in education, 9.4 out of 10. It's doing well in health. It's doing well in access to services and safety. Civic engagement is rock bottom. People aren't really exercising their rights. The environment is not considered to, the quality of the environment in Western Slovenia is problematic. Again, remember, this is, the indicators are limited. And income is relatively low as well. What the feature we do have is, what region do these results seem similar to within the OECD? And if you zoom, it's like the southern district of Israel. Did you know that? I didn't. Or like Mazowiecki in Poland. I don't know Mazowiecki, so some of you may. Saxony-Anhalt or Prague. So there are connections there regionally, but hey, Israel's out there, so that's really interesting. Again, it's where you see these connections that we're allowing people to see, which is, you know, there are situations in other parts of the world that are relatively similar to yours. Now, I have a little comment here, which I think I might read. Yeah, Southern District, it's the largest of Israel's 6 districts in terms of land area, as well as the most sparsely populated. It covers the Negev Desert, as well as the Arava Valley, population of 1 million. Right, so it's desert-like. I don't really know that Western Slovenia is desert-like, but anyway, there you go. I mean, this has a little bit of a way to go, obviously, but it's really caught the public attention as well. Why? Because you're going regional, you're going local. One thing we're discussing, we've got a strong interest from cities in being able to do an index for cities. As we know, so many people live in cities, and cities are the essence of future breakthroughs in public policy in whatever domain. A lot of it starts in cities. I was talking about Vélib and Autolib in Paris yesterday. That really changes behaviour that can have major impacts. So really, I wanted to leave it there. I mean, the first one, what it means for the OECD, I won't worry too much about that one. The last one, it's interesting. We're very connected into the G20 work, tax havens, things like that. And we've had, Angela Merkel said that for her G8 presidency, the German G8 presidency, they wanted to put well-being quite high on the agenda. So we are seeing it percolating. But thank you very much for listening. I have some reports on Slovenia here for those of you who might be interested. And if you have any questions or you have any comments or violent objections, now's the time to express them.
I mean, as a politician, how do I take advantage of this? How do I say that, look, you know, the government is in power, you know, obviously we haven't improved the way we should be, or look, now we're at the level of Poland or whatever, and then, so, I mean, how could you actually exploit this to get more attention to it and to make sure that it does what I think it's supposed to do, which is that everybody starts being better off?
Good question, because I think this is a question a little bit of timing as well. How mature is this? What I'd say, number one, is that there are a huge number of national initiatives that are being taken forward now around well-being. So this isn't something that we're just worrying about at the OECD. This is being worried about at country level in many countries in the OECD and beyond, so it's being taken seriously. What this is, I think the use here for politicians certainly is the fact that you can see that people who politicians represent care about this stuff. And I think this multidimensionality element is a very important one. Can you actually get political discourse to become a little bit more sophisticated, to say, hang on, we can't just bring it down to it's all about the immigrants, or it's all about, you know, what sometimes happens. This is supposed to raise the debate. This is supposed to raise the debate. Shortly before the European elections, the OECD had come out with analysis regarding the budgetary cost of immigration in countries. We issued this analysis a week before the European elections. We did it because we wanted people to know the facts before they went to vote. And as many of you know, issues around migration and immigration were playing strongly in a number of campaigns in countries in Europe. Well, if you're interested in the facts, these are the facts, budgetarily neutral. If you play your cards right, 1% of GDP up, if you harness immigration. Why has Germany got through the crisis so well? Because of its policy of active immigration. Wow. And the German media covered it lock, stock and barrel. So you can get facts through to people and through to the media. When people say, no, they're all cynical, they're not interested, not true what we saw. So I think these elements, factual elements, that provide information directly to citizens anyway, I think what this is going to do is going to turn the heat up on politicians. Because people are going to be able to look at this stuff and go, hey, I've got the data. Also, I've got the reports that underlie it. Why is it that Finland has far better educational performance than France or the United Kingdom? What's the reason? I can see the policy measures they've taken. Why don't you take the same policy measures? Oh, because it's very cold up there and it's very different. No. Or why does Mexico do very well in a particular domain and not another one? What this, I think, what it does is it demystifies things. And just like back in the late 90s, international trade goes from being the purview of the experts into the public domain. People care about trade and what it means. Similarly for tax policy now and for financial services, people care about this stuff. I'm under pressure to... oh no, we finish in 5 minutes. Okay, I thought you wanted me to stop right now. Okay. I think the potential is very strong. I mean, in India, I put up a facetious visual. I had Obama on the left-hand side and his opponent in the last election, Romney, slipped my mind. And I had them basically imagining a future election, and one are putting up on screen, this is the proportion that I'm going to give you. If you vote for me, I'm going to place the emphasis on, relative to another one. I don't know, maybe it's a pipe dream, but at least the idea is to try and get things based more on rational stuff. get it based more on factual stuff. Because I think people are really interested in having information. And there's less of the ideological stuff. I was in Mexico, we run a big parliamentary network now, and we have meetings 3 times a year, and now on the road, take it into countries. And people say, look, people aren't into ideologies now. They're into effective and efficient government. And those who are able to provide effective and efficient government are going to do the best. And if what people are interested in works along these 11 dimensions, and you can show results, then that's something that could impact. Can I ask, are there, if you can flip back in the presentation to the to the beginning, just click, 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 click. I want to give you that list of the 11 dimensions again.
The OECD is
Oh shit, we've got the man going.
Index, an interactive tool that allows you to measure and compare
Just turn off the sound and then it's fine.
Yeah, sorry, he was busy turning it up earlier. Thank you very much. But I just wanted you to look at that list again. If there were things that were lacking, if there were any elements that struck you, there's one I'm going to throw out. There's an absence of sport and culture. And certainly for me, I think the well-being around cultural activity, whether that's film, theatre, music, dance, painting, anything you can imagine, doing it or seeing it, and the value that brings also, if you think of people that you really admire, how many of us really admire great musicians, great artists, poets, writers? We know that these people capture our imagination, great filmmakers.
But couldn't you say that in the work-life balance, that's part of life? Because it's the stuff you do when you're not working, so you do your culture activities, your sports, and these other things. So if there's no life to go to, then obviously you can't have a work-life balance.
Which one?
Just click through to where we get, carry on.
The list.
That's it, and where we get the icons coming up.
More.
There, click one more. There we go, yeah. So I mean, that's a personal thing. Why don't we have it in, or we don't measure it at the OECD? It's not a reason. So what I'm looking at here as well is the sorts of things that you feel are lacking and that you might want to see in an initiative of this type for the future, because we've kicked off with 11, but I don't believe that that's anything like the last word. Is there anything that springs into your mind that you're not seeing there? What about that up there right now? What are we seeing? Clouds and rain. That's another factor for me. I have to confess. You know, it's all very well this stuff about your income, your job, your health. If I never see the sunshine, personally, I have an issue. Unfortunately, I was born in London, spent most of my life in Brussels, Paris, and northern climates. So there's a point probably where I'm going to have to move to somewhere where I lived 1 year with the sun shone, and I've never recovered from leaving it. But these are examples as well, things that we laugh about. But think about the huge migration that takes place in Europe every summer. It's like the birds. You know those people who spend their entire life criticising the periphery at the moment in the Eurozone? Oh, those Spaniards and those Italians and those Portuguese and those Greeks. Where did you take your holidays? Oh, Spain, Greece, Portugal. Oh, that's interesting. So, how do you connect in some of these things? These are things that one has to have in one's mind. Well, thank you very much indeed for joining me this afternoon. If you want more info, let me know. But the critical thing is it's the website oecdbetterlifeindex.org, and if you're interested in this responses bit in particular, it's a /responses, or the little in the header you will see responses up there. And as I said, there are a few reports here on Slovenia for those who are interested. Thanks a lot.